A silent crisis is creeping across the United States, threatening to reshape our urban landscapes and displace millions. It's not just rising sea levels, but a double whammy of coastal flooding and an invisible menace: land subsidence. Imagine your home, your neighborhood, your entire city slowly sinking, inch by inch, year after year. This isn't a dystopian fantasy. It's a stark reality for millions of Americans, poised to unleash an unprecedented wave of homelessness and economic devastation. Prepare to discover which major U.S. metros are on the brink and what this means for our collective future. The unseen threat: why America's cities are sinking beneath our feet. For decades, the conversation around climate change and its impact on coastal communities has largely revolved around rising sea levels. While undeniably critical, a new, alarming study in Nature Cities has unveiled a hidden issue, with all 28 of the most populous U.S. cities experiencing some degree of sinking. This revelation fundamentally shifts our understanding of the climate crisis, adding a critical layer of urgency to adaptation efforts. The study, which utilized SAR measurements from 2015 to 2021 from the Sentinel-1 mission, created detailed maps of ground deformation, revealing that in a staggering 25 out of the 28 cities, at least 65% of the land area is actively subsiding. This downward movement, even a few millimeters a year, silently compromises critical infrastructure, from buildings and roads to vital utility networks. The combined impact of sinking land and encroaching waters creates a perfect storm, intensifying flood risks and pushing communities closer to the brink. Shocking statistics, the unsettling numbers behind the crisis. The new study paints a grim picture with alarming statistics that demand immediate attention. An estimated 33.8 million people in the United States currently reside on sinking land across the 28 most populous U.S. cities. This isn't a localized issue. It's a nationwide vulnerability. The study reveals that in every one of these 28 major cities, at least 20% of the land area is subsiding, and in 25 of the 28 cities, at least 65% of the land area is sinking. Some of the fastest sinking areas are experiencing rates of subsidence exceeding 4 millimeters per year, significantly higher than the typical background rate of less than a couple of millimeters per year. For perspective, rates above 2 millimeters per year are already known to cause damage to infrastructure. Looking ahead to 2050, the projections are even more concerning. A recent study published in Nature estimates that an additional land area between 1,406 and 1,789 square kilometers is threatened by relative sea level rise, putting an estimated 95,000 to 373,000 people and 41,000 to 191,000 properties at risk. This means approximately 1 in 45 people and 1 in 30 privately owned properties in these 32 coastal cities could face significant flooding by mid-century. The potential value of exposed properties ranges from $52 billion to $209 billion, a conservative estimate that doesn't even account for critical infrastructure like airports, hospitals, and power plants. These are not distant threats. They are immediate and accelerating realities that will reshape the American landscape. Houston's harrowing descent, the fastest sinking city in America. While subsidence affects cities across the nation, some are sinking at alarming rates. Houston, Texas, stands out as the fastest sinking major city in the U.S. More than 40% of its land is subsiding at a rate greater than 5 millimeters per year, with 12% sinking at twice that rate, reaching as much as 5 centimeters 2 inches annually in some localized spots. This rapid descent is largely attributed to excessive groundwater pumping and, in some areas, oil and gas extraction, which deplete subsurface aquifers and cause the land above to compact. The consequences are already being felt. Groundwater pumping near Houston correlated directly with increased flood severity during Hurricane Harvey in 2017. Imagine the future. As sea levels continue to rise and the very ground beneath the city steadily gives way, the dual threat dramatically exacerbates the risk of catastrophic flooding, threatening homes, businesses, and the lives of millions. Beyond the coasts, inland cities face their own sinking nightmare. The pervasive nature of land subsidence means this isn't exclusively a coastal problem. Even inland cities, far from the direct influence of ocean tides, are grappling with sinking land. Dallas and Fort Worth, two other major Texas metros, are experiencing significant subsidence, with average rates exceeding 4 millimeters per year. Other inland cities affected include Chicago, Detroit, New York, though also coastal, Denver, and Indianapolis. In Chicago, Detroit, and New York, among others, more than 98% of the urban land is experiencing some degree of sinking. This often stems from groundwater withdrawal for urban and agricultural use, but also from natural geological processes like glacial isostatic adjustment, where land that once bulged upwards due to the weight of ancient ice sheets is now slowly rebounding and sinking. The impact on infrastructure in these areas is profound, potentially leading to damaged foundations, cracked roads, and compromised utility lines. The insidious nature of subsidence means these damages can remain latent for years, only becoming evident when they're severe or even catastrophic, catching communities off guard. The looming displacement, millions at risk of becoming climate refugees. The combined forces of sea level rise and land subsidence are setting the stage for an unprecedented displacement crisis. According to a 2022 U.S. Sea Level Change Technical Report, sea level along the U.S. coastline is predicted to rise 10 to 12 inches, 0.25 to 0.5 meters, over the next 30 years, an amount equal to the rise observed over the entire last century, 1920-2020. By 2050, minor flooding is expected to occur on average more than 10 times as often as it does today, while major flooding is projected to occur 5 times as often. This increased frequency and severity of flooding, coupled with sinking land, means that millions of Americans will find their homes increasingly vulnerable and eventually uninhabitable. A study from Virginia Tech found that 34 million people, or more than 1 in 10 Americans, currently live in the 28 major U.S. cities experiencing land subsidence. While not all will be immediately displaced, the long-term projections are sobering. Earlier predictions from the peer-reviewed scientific journal PLOS, suggests that sea level rise alone could force over 13 million people to move by 2100. When you factor in the accelerating rates of land subsidence, these figures could be significantly higher. The economic implications are staggering. The Congressional Budget Office, CBO, estimates that with roughly 4 feet of sea level rise, recurring flooding could cause the loss of residential property currently worth $930 billion, approximately 2% of the total value of U.S. residential property. These losses will be borne by property owners, mortgage lenders, insurance companies, and the federal government, creating a ripple effect across the entire U.S. economy. Cities on the edge, who's next to face the floodwaters? A number of major U.S. cities are particularly vulnerable to the synergistic threats of subsidence and coastal flooding, creating a critical need for proactive planning and adaptation. New Orleans, Louisiana, already a stark example of climate vulnerability. Much of New Orleans lies below sea level, protected by levees that notoriously failed during Hurricane Katrina, 2005, leading to 80% of the city being flooded and an estimated $125 billion in damages. With ongoing subsidence and rising sea levels, New Orleans remains critically at risk, requiring continuous, extensive flood defense improvements. Miami Beach, Florida. This world-famous destination sits just a few feet above sea level, making it highly susceptible to storm surge flooding. Historical peak surge during Hurricane Irma, 2017, reached 9.45 feet, with sea level rise projected at 10 to 17 inches by 2040 for southeast Florida. Miami Beach is already experiencing more frequent sunny day flooding, a precursor to more severe inundation. Charleston, South Carolina. Known for its historic charm, Charleston's low-lying coastal geography puts it directly in the path of storm surges and king tides. Sunny day, flooding has increased by 220% since 2000 in Charleston. The city saw a 12-foot peak surge during Hurricane Hugo in 1989, and annual flood advisories now exceed 50. Galveston, Texas. Situated on a barrier island, Galveston's flat topography and open water exposure make extremely vulnerable. Despite a massive 17-foot seawall built after the catastrophic 1900 hurricane, the city remains at high risk, experiencing a 15.7-foot surge during Hurricane Ike, 2008. Approximately 50,000 residents are at risk. New York City, New York. While some areas are experiencing uplift due to glacial rebound, Parts of NYC are sinking, particularly low-lying areas and critical infrastructure zones like LaGuardia Airport. The sheer density of buildings, over 1 million, may also be contributing to localized subsidence by compressing the underlying soil. Coupled with projections of 10 to 14 inches of sea level rise on the East Coast by 2050, NYC faces significant flood risk, especially in low-lying coastal neighborhoods. Tampa Bay, Florida. This densely populated region is highly susceptible to both rising seas and land subsidence, which is exacerbated by groundwater withdrawals. Saltwater intrusion into freshwater aquifers is an increasing concern, adding another layer of complexity to the region's climate challenges. Sacramento, California. While not coastal, Sacramento sits in California's Central Valley, a region known for some of the fastest rates of subsidence globally due to decades of groundwater overdraft for agriculture. This sinking land exacerbates flood risk from rivers and creates stress on extensive levee systems. San Antonio, Texas. The Nature City study specifically highlighted San Antonio as facing the greatest risk from differential motion, where adjacent areas sink at different rates, or even where some areas sink while others rise. The researchers found that an alarming 1 in every 45 buildings in San Antonio is at high risk of damage from this uneven ground movement. These cities and many others are not merely facing a distant threat. They are already experiencing the early impacts, from increased sunny day flooding to infrastructure strain. The question is not if, but when these combined forces will necessitate significant and disruptive changes. The economic tsunami, why climate displacement will rock the nation. The implications of widespread climate displacement extend far beyond individual tragedies. They pose a profound threat to the U.S. economy. As properties in high-risk areas become increasingly vulnerable, property values are projected to plummet. A First Street Foundation study estimates a net aggregate potential $1.23 trillion in value losses for U.S. residential properties by 2055 due to climate risk. Over 70,000 neighborhoods, or 84% of U.S. Census tracts, could experience some form of negative property value impacts from climate risk. Home insurance markets are already reeling. Insurers are curbing offerings in disaster-prone states like California and Florida, or significantly raising premiums, making homeownership unaffordable or even impossible for many. This leaves homeowners in vulnerable areas with dwindling options, facing the prospect of uninsured losses, or being trapped in properties they cannot sell. Local governments, heavily reliant on property taxes, will see their tax bases erode just as they need to invest massive sums in adaptation and mitigation efforts. This creates a severe fiscal squeeze, potentially leading to cuts in essential public services or increased taxes on a shrinking, less affluent population. Furthermore, the displacement of millions will strain housing markets in receiving areas, potentially driving up rents and exacerbating the existing national affordable housing crisis. The U.S. is already short as many as 5 million homes, and nearly half of American renters are housing cost-burdened. A large influx of climate migrants will intensify competition for limited housing, pushing even more people into housing insecurity and, inevitably, homelessness. This climate gentrification could also push lower-income communities out of safer areas as property values there rise due to increased demand. The human cost, a new era of climate-induced homelessness. The most devastating consequence of sinking cities and coastal flooding will be the human toll, particularly the rise of climate-induced homelessness. When homes are destroyed or rendered uninhabitable by floods or structural damage from subsidence, people are forced to leave. For those with financial means, relocation may be possible, albeit disruptive. But for vulnerable populations, low-income households, communities of color, the elderly, and those already on the margins, the impact will be catastrophic. Existing research highlights that housing supply constraints, often linked to land use regulations, contribute to homelessness by driving up eviction rates. When climate change damages existing housing stock, it acts as a massive, sudden constraint on supply, leading to mass evictions by default. Many will lack the resources to rebuild or relocate, leading to a surge in unsheltered populations. Already, natural disasters impacted 10% of all U.S. homes in 2021, resulting in nearly $60 billion in damage and displacing 570,000 people. As these events become more frequent and severe, the numbers of displaced will skyrocket.